Okay, so this lesson is, we're looking at the find out activity that was in the textbook. We're looking at 4 reactions, and we just have to be able to determine if the reactions are balanced or not. So I'm just going to make a dotted line here to show reactants on the left-hand side and our products on the right-hand side of our arrow. And so on our reactant side, we have O, which represents oxygen, and we have H, which represents hydrogen. Okay, so let's just take a look on our left-hand side. How many oxygens we have on the left-hand side? There's a coefficient of 2, and there's no subscript. So there's a total of 2 oxygens on the left-hand side. Hydrogens, we have a subscript of 2 as well as a coefficient of 2. So we can multiply those two together, and that gives me 4 hydrogens on the left-hand side. So we're going to do the same thing on our product side. So oxygen, there's a subscript of 2, so therefore there are 2 oxygens on the product side. And then our hydrogens on the product side, we have a subscript of 2 and a coefficient of 2. So 2 times 2, that gives me a total of 4. So oxygens are 2 and 2 on the reactant side, 2 on the product side, so it's balanced. Hydrogen, there's 4 on the reactant side, 4 on the product side, so therefore this equation is balanced. All right, so here is our second equation. We have CH4 plus O2, and it produces CO2 plus H2O. So CH4 is actually methane gas plus oxygen gas produces carbon dioxide gas and water vapor. It's in the gas form. So the 3 elements that we have are C, which represents carbon, H represents hydrogen, and O represents oxygen. So I've just written those out here on the left-hand side for my reactants. Look at our product side. We have a C, which represents carbon. We have an O for oxygen. I just put it the exact same for reactants, just so we can compare them afterwards. And then H represents hydrogen. All right, so we have CHO, CHO. So now we'll count the atoms. So carbon here, there's no subscript for it. There's no coefficient here either. So that means there's 1 carbon. 1 carbon on the reactant side. Next, we'll count our hydrogens. We have a subscript of 4 under H. So that means there's 4 hydrogens. So we're going to put 4 here. And then lastly is oxygen. Oxygen has a subscript of 2. So that means there's 2 hydrogens. We'll do the same thing on our product side. So if we look at our carbon, there's no subscript, there's no coefficient, so there's just 1 carbon. Hydrogen is here. There's a subscript of 2 here by hydrogen, so that means there's 2 hydrogens. And then oxygens, there's 2 oxygens here because there's a subscript of 2, and there's 1 oxygen here as well. So we have 2 plus 1, there's 3 oxygens. So now if we look at our left-hand side and our right-hand side, carbon is balanced, hydrogen is not, because there's 4 on the reactant side and 2 on the product side. And then oxygen is not balanced either. There's 2 on the reactant side, there's 3 on the product side. So we can say that this equation therefore is not balanced. All right, so our next equation, we have nitrogen gas plus oxygen gas is producing, it's a nitrogen oxide gas or nitrogen monoxide gas. So I'm just going to split it here, reactants and products. So always up the arrow is where I put this dotted line. So on my reactant side, I have nitrogen and I have oxygen. And on my product side, I also have nitrogen and oxygen. Okay, next we can calculate or count our atoms. So on nitrogen on our reactant side, there is a subscript of 2, so that means there's 2 nitrogens. And oxygen, there are 2 because of that subscript, so there's 2 oxygens. Looking on our product side, we have a coefficient of 2. This coefficient applies to both the N and the O. So nitrogen, there is 2, and oxygen, there is 2. All right, so our left-hand side and right-hand side are both the same. There's 2 nitrogens, 2 oxygens here, and 2 oxygens there. So therefore, this equation is balanced. All right, so here is our next example. We have mercury oxide, and it's producing mercury solid plus oxygen gas. So on our reactant side, we have Hg, which is mercury. There's a coefficient of 2 in front of the HgO, so that means there's 2 mercuries here. And oxygen, because the coefficient 2 is also in front of the O here, there is 2 oxygens. Next, on the product side, we have mercury. All right, there's no coefficient, there's no subscript, so there's only 1. And then oxygen, we have a subscript of 2, so there's 2 oxygens. All right, so because there's 2 mercuries on the left side and only 1 on the right side, we will say that this equation is not balanced.